in red communities. Go Blue voters. We meet Sundays, 8:30 p.m. until the week after the election to celebrate together, I'm sure. And it's 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, which is 5:30 p.m. on the other coast.
Hello, everyone. I'm settling into space with you all after a good day and a good weekend. I really missed being here last week. I had a fall right before we were supposed to have our conversation. And in the interest of not coming on super shook up, and also my elbows hurt sitting at the computer, I decided to give a pass. And I heard that Truly and Patricia did a wonderful Q&A, so I'm glad about that. The other very important shout out that it feels important to do is that Miss Kathleen Mozak, who is with us tonight, it is her birthday. Happy birthday, Kathleen. And thank you. An extra thank you for spending some birthday moments with us. We appreciate it. All right, so to answer possibly your most urgent question, are you in the right place? The answer is yes. This content is specifically designed for white women, femmes, and thems, but it is also designed to be intersectional and used by anyone. So if those categories are not how you identify, but you'd like to attend to learn more or bring these learnings back to your friends and family, welcome. And Patricia, if we could hang on this slide, it's fine for just a moment. I also wanted to note that if anybody has been participating in the National Women Wednesdays action calls, last week was called a masterclass of voter outreach. And if you have listened to 1, 2, or all 3 of our first conversations, you've actually already attended the masterclass. We did in 3 conversations what they condensed down into about 8 minutes. So if you haven't had a chance yet, I hope you get a chance to go back and listen to those. I also wanted to note that as we're talking through these things, you may be coming in with a question, how can I quickly change people's minds? That's not what this is about. Sometimes success is not going to happen in a single conversation. And sometimes success doesn't only look like changing somebody's vote. It also looks like having a meaningful conversation, listening meaningfully, having someone listening meaningfully to you, which is also to say, nobody here needs to be a policy or a politics expert. It's not about that. You, whether you know it or not, you're already an influencer. You got your cousin to get an air fryer or an Instant Pot, both solid choices. You got your mom to buy your dog sibling a cuter leash. You can get them to vote. So I just wanted to make those comments before we go on. Thanks, Patricia.
Thank you, Jess. Can I go forward now?
I wish you would, yes. And for folks joining us on Instagram, we also have a Zoom component to this. You are not missing any content, but on Zoom, we have a slide deck like the grownups that we often are. So we say all of the things here, but just so you know, when we reference that verbally, that's what we're talking about. And for friends on Zoom, if you ever want to join us on Insta, you always can.
It's our backup plan.
That's our backup plan. That's right. The next thing that I wanted to address is we hear most frequently why white women, not even why women, but why white women. The first reason is we are America's largest voting bloc, which is something actually that I learned this year. We are also a group that is trending upwards in voting for Trump. In 2016, the estimates are that white women went 47% for Trump. In 2020, that went up to 53%. So I feel a sense of urgency in making sure that I am talking to my people, which is white women, also everybody, but specifically addressing white women. And also because women are typically the most likely to affect the most effective change, which is person-to-person conversations. Phone banking, great. Canvassing, great. Both necessary. Engaging in volunteerism with the campaign, excellent. But what we're talking about is kitchen table conversations, one at a time, often with folks that are the closest to you emotionally and may have a big distance from you politically. So that's why we're talking to white folks.
So in all of these conversations, and truthfully, many of my conversations, both personal and professional, Jess and I create working agreements. And so these, when we went into this conversation, and as we invited Truly into this conversation as our moderator and content partner, These were the things that we talked about. Jess, you want to kick us off?
I do. The very first one is we put aside the right to comfort in these conversations. The world that we're trying to address is not safe. And so this space is not safe. It's a brave space. So we invite our courage and our loving accountability. And I also want to celebrate those of us who are here. This is an invitation, but also an acknowledgement. It does take a lot of courage to have these conversations. I heard an activist say one time, it's much harder to talk to your mom than it is to the male person. That's so that's so real. So here we put aside the right to comfort with the courage that comes along with it.
And celebrate discomfort, truthfully, and name it.
Yeah.
We also resist binary thinking. A context means everything. Rarely are any of the issues that we're dealing with as humans black or white. It all depends on context, who we're talking to. We want to resist making something right or wrong or black or white. That it is a wide variety, and it really depends on the moment you're in. So resisting binary thinking.
The next one is that we in this space welcome generative conflict. In dominant culture in the United States, in the Midwest, where we are as women, I'm a native Southerner, all of these groups are often rewarded for being nice instead of being real, and for being conciliatory instead of leading into productive disagreement. So in this space, I would like to invite us to allow a lot of emotional space to be in conflict with each other, with the ideas being presented, and even with ourselves. Let's love each other enough to tell the truth and to hold up mirrors that need holding up. Kindness and honesty are not mutually exclusive.
And fourth, we always ask for the speed we need. And this is not about becoming more comfortable, but about becoming more thoughtful. So by listening to reflect rather than listening to respond, and asking for time or a moment or some silence, asking for the speed that we need as we learn something new is incredibly important. And honestly, one of the reasons I love talking about this one, it's made me a better person because I less and less answer things off the cuff. I go up to the resisting binary thinking, and I think about the context I'm in, and I think about, everything that could go into that. So asking for the speed that we need is important to us. So am I talking about this?
No, this is Miss Truly.
This is Truly.
Hi, everybody. It's my turn. I was having a Bueller moment. Hi.
Bueller.
It's me, Truly. Hi. I am your friendly chat facilitator. Hello, Instagram Live. Hello, everyone here on Zoom. I would love it if you could give me a hand, and only feel like, you can use the Q&A, you can use the chat, you can also just note your chat functionalities within Zoom. You can talk to just Patricia and Jess and myself if you want to toggle down and just say, I only really want to talk to my hosts and panelists. That's okay. And we will keep that anonymous as we address it in the group. Also, if you want to chat to everyone and just make this a full community conversation and you feel like you're safe and great doing that, feel free to do that too. So, and Instagram folks, I'm so sorry. I cannot pay attention to your comments and chats. I love you, but
I'll be watching.
Yeah.
Jess will be watching and talk amongst yourselves.
Yes.
Thanks, Jess. So yes, I'm a community member. I am your chat facilitator, and I do have just a few quick notes on the community guidelines. We're going to keep comments on topic. We are going to keep the conversation respectful. And if you have other working agreements that you can think of for this space, drop them in the chat. We're open, and we're building this machine as we're driving it. So if there's other things that we should be adding, we want to know. So that's me. I'm going to mostly have camera off because these two lovely humans are going to really guide you through this content. But I cannot wait to see what your responses, questions, and comments are in the chat.
Awesome. And Truly, do you want to introduce yourself?
Oh, I mean, I kind of did.
You
Hi.
kind of did. That's Truly Redner.
It's
our
me.
moderator extraordinaire.
I am facilitating the chat. What do I want to say about me? I am a mom. I am a mom of a teenager who is learning to drive. So if I seem frayed and tired, that is because we tried the expressway today. What else do I want to say about that? I am here with you in so many ways. I am here with you as a former independent business owner. I am here with you as a parent. I am here with you as a voter. I am here with you as someone who's really concerned about the safety of my kid in terms of living in a country that's filled with guns. So I have a lot of thoughts on my mind on a daily basis, and I know you do too. So it's really nice to meet you and be with you in this space.
Awesome. And as for us, I'm Patricia Berry. I'm a white, cis, hetero woman, salty Buddhist in a relationship with a white, cis, hetero male, which often comes into our conversations about relationships and having those intimate conversations that are sometimes more difficult than going toe to toe with strangers. And I don't know what else to say about myself. Now I'm going to turn it over to Jess.
What do you do during the day?
Oh, what do I do during the day? I am a free-range fundraising consultant who specializes in anti-racist approaches to sharing wealth. And I just launched a new learning community that's an online learning community and a live coaching hybrid. So you can check me out if you're interested in any of that.
I am Jessica A.S. Letaw. Most people call me Jess. I am a white, cis, queer woman, originally from Atlanta and Athens, Georgia. I now live in Michigan. During the day and in the evenings, I am a housing and racial justice organizer. I am intensely interested in what a healthy relationship to whiteness and a healthy white part of our culture and policies could look like. And so I try to participate in a lot of those conversations. The minute that Kamala declared, oh, we're going to get into this in a second, but the minute that Kamala declared, I was really interested to know how, in particular, white women could play a role in helping get her elected. And so I brought really the work that I've done for the last decade or so in community organizing around housing and race into these conversations. So I'll go ahead and finish my why, Patricia. And then
I was like, you're already in your why, baby.
I'm on a roll.
I'm going.
Man.
I'm going
Let's
forward.
do it. Okay, so one of the reasons that I'm here is, I mentioned at the top of the conversation why we are specifically addressing white women. And because I think white women have such an opportunity to change the outcome of this election, to make it something where we don't have to worry about the Supreme Court for the next 4 or 20 years, where we don't have to worry about women's rights, single parents' rights, LGBTQ plus rights, being eroded and taken away entirely. I am deeply interested in how white women engage the voting process. And so part of my, a big part of my driver for wanting this conversation is that I want us, Patricia, me, Truly, and all of us here to change white women's voting behavior in swing communities. Our election, because of how the electoral college works, is going to come down to about 6% of voters. That's a lot of us here and our families. So I am excited. Let's up and go.
And as for me, I really came into both my friendship with Jess as well as my broader work. I'm not necessarily interested in raising money, but I'm interested in how communities come together or fall apart, and asking about or talking about a taboo subject like raising money or asking for money is the quickest way to screw that up or solidify it. So it's a deep interest for me to think about how we have really caring conversations that are also brave about things we care about and that things we're uncomfortable talking about, like kind of getting rid of some of that silent space. I was certainly raised for 18 years in the West and a lot of silence. So having brave conversations is really important to me.
All right. I always like to talk about where we are in this moment. And let's see. 47. I think we're at 51 days until the election. I'm actually not great at remembering the exact number of days, but we're super close. And so every single moment between here and election day counts. We now have our first debate in the books, and I am super curious to know how you think it went. When I was new to politics and was watching debates, I was waiting for some like all-seeing objective arbiter to say who won and who didn't win. Turns out nobody actually does this, and so it's just like the court of public opinion, and who won depends on who you are. But
I
I'm
love the
really,
live fact checking though.
yes, the
That
live
was
fact
new.
checking was strong, absolutely.
Yeah.
Um, Speaking of that, there has been an elevated amount of hateful speech and action directed towards Haitian immigrants in general, Haitians, immigrants, Black people. At this point in Springfield, Ohio, schools have been um, uh, evacuated multiple times due to bomb threats. So far, nothing credible, nothing has been found there, but it's a continuous disruption. And so it just really speaks to the power of people with that kind of platform, the kind of instantaneous behaviors that they can affect. I also want to note, in the spirit of the election being 50 days away, that absentee ballots are starting to drop. If you're in a state that does no reason or with reason absentee voting, sometimes you can do mail-in, sometimes you can vote at your polling place ahead of election day. Those are starting to come down. And I just want to remind everybody, check your down ballot races from all the way at the very top, your presidential election, to all the way at the very bottom, which tends to be your school board, your local sheriff, your local ballot proposals, which often have to do with taxes and how your municipality is organized. So make sure if you've got a back to the ballot that you flip it over and are ready to vote all the way up and down the ballot.
So just to briefly shout out what we've covered so far, as Jess said in the beginning, like you guys already have done your master's level class. If you see our previous videos, we talked about boundaries, loving agreements, deep listening, and how to, instead of lecture, white ladies, instead of using your intellectual superpower to lecture, to instead tell I stories about how you came to the beliefs that you hold and what they mean to you and the community that you're living in, talking about things that you know through really effective political storytelling. And we gave some great examples of that in the last episode on stories and deep listening.
Mm-hmm.
And what are we talking about today?
Today we are talking about apathetic voters and protest voters. I may also put in a small disclaimer about what's the other one? Undecided voters. But we'll see about that. We'll see how we're doing on time and what everybody's interest is. Okay, so apathetic voters, people who vote inconsistently, only in general elections, only in presidential elections, only when they are aware that there is an election going on. Not everybody is super keyed into their state and local election processes. So apathetic voters are defined, I think, more by their behavior than actually an emotion of apathy. And we're gonna kind of unpeel different forms of quote unquote apathy. And then protest voters are the ones who, people who vote for a third party protesting one or both major political parties. In the United States, we are functionally a two-party system, the Democrats and the Republicans. There are other parties like the Green Party, the Working Families Party, and I'm sure that I'm missing others. In New York for a little while, there was the Rent is Too Damn High Party, and I would have been a member of that one, but I just yanked on Patricia's chain, sorry. Long time New Yorker over there.
Yeah. My high rent brings all the dogs to the yard.
Right. in Ann Arbor too. So I wanted us as a group, now that over the last few conversations, we've been building tools to have these difficult conversations with people. I wanted us to understand with a little bit more nuance who it is we're talking to. What about whiteness is this disrupting? We are absolutely adding nuance to our collective understanding of both groups of people. We're also having a clearer understanding of how class and race have a lot to do with how we as individuals approach voting. And we're also visibilizing whiteness in voters and voting behaviors, not just highlighting people of color and those holding other marginalized identities. So really, we're just kind of shining a flashlight on some different groups. I want to check in with Patricia and Truly, make sure we haven't left out anything important before we jump into the juicy stuff.
I'm good. We actually, it was last week that Truly and I had the question from the audience about how to deal with apathetic, or what it meant about third party voters. And I had an answer, and I'm going to be really curious to see if you and I share the answer the same, have the same.
That's great. We're gonna get into that. Do y'all see that amazing question in chat?
What is the question that came across chat?
What is whiteness?
I'm so
Oh,
glad you noticed it, Jess, because I was like, can we talk about that first?
yes,
Thank you.
absolutely. Kathy, I
Love the
super
question.
appreciate-
Thank you.
yes, what is whiteness? I'll start and invite Patricia to come in with your thoughts and feelings.
Mhm.
Oh, then I got tangled up in where to start. I'm like, okay, let's start with America. No, let's start with the diaspora. Okay, let's start with America. In America, we have a culture that is white centered and white privileging. That means that there are elements of our culture that organize towards making sure that our systems and institutions continue to elevate resources, capital, and opportunity towards white people, white communities, and folks that are white proximate. I'm gonna let y'all Google that one because I'm excited about this question and it's a big one. Disrupting white culture a lot of times just means that we're naming it. Whiteness is considered such a default characteristic in the United States that we often don't even know what it looks like, sounds like, feels like, is described by, which to your point, Kathy, I think a lot of folks wonder what is whiteness. It can look like perfectionism. It can look like manufactured urgency. It can look like elevating particular narratives and types of narratives over others. So for example, prioritizing written knowledge transfer over oral knowledge transfer. Those are just some characteristics of a white dominant culture. This is not to say that being white is inherently wrong. It absolutely is not. Being in a culture that privileges and prioritizes whiteness is something that needs disrupting and maybe a little light smashing, which is a little bit what we're doing here.
Yeah.
Patricia, what do you think?
This is such a lovely subject, and I wish we had about 75 hours to talk about it. My friend Harry and I have had about 50,000 conversations on what is whiteness.
Yeah.
It's for me, and I'm just going to speak for myself. When I analyze what we're up to, we're talking about power and how power is identified in a white male body. And the way is made clear for a white body, a white presenting body. And then you have all sorts of other shenanigans going on that I find have gotten so complicated because we have made presenting white about power, right? How do I get the way made clear to me? I have a beloved friend who is actually a part of the Cherokee Nation. She self-identifies as Cherokee and is uncomfortable because nobody clocks it and feels this deep disruption of passing, not passing. So the way that I put it into context is thinking about who is the way made clear for, and who is the group, that is as Jess says, elevated and inheritable, so when you think about college, getting into college, it's not about whether you're good or smart. It's about generation after generation after generation that ensured that there was legacy people coming into college, that ensured that it started in kindergarten or pre-kindergarten or natal healthcare for white babies getting better nutrition. And then I'm going to get off the soapbox because it just like blows my mind.
It's big.
But it, it's all the way from, in your utero to how you were trained in kindergarten, whether you're going to make it into college or not. It's really not about whether you were smart or worthy. It is a power system game that ensures the only people that have access to power are the people who we want to stay in power. So that is a very small section of a massive subject. Julie, do you have anything you want to offer up for that? I love that question. Whoever did that question, thank you.
Yeah, Kathy, that's awesome. And there's a hyperlinked link in the chat. All I want to add is that we have a Move the Needle book stack. And in that book stack, it's just tinyurl.com/move the needle books. And it leads to Ann Arbor independent bookstore called Book Suite. It's a Black-owned, woman-owned shop. And they ship anywhere. So if you live not in Michigan, that is okay. There's so many great books on this list, but one that was really helpful, not only to deconstruct the question of what is whiteness, but what is whiteness to me and what has it meant and how has it shaped my family and the systems I benefit from. It's called White Supremacy. It's called Me and White Supremacy by Layla Syed. And you can find it at that book stack, tinyurl.com/move the needle books. So I can't recommend it enough. It's got exercises and self-reflection, because I think there is a systemic answer to that, and just really pointed that out. But how does that unfold in your life and in the life of your family, your extended family, and what you've been told about the world in ways that you might not realize, and in ways that certainly, have an impact. So I can't recommend it enough. That's all I got to add.
And I'll just tell you from a relationship perspective, my white self and my white boyfriend have been reading chapter by chapter over the last several months, and having discussions about it that have been very illuminating. So it's a tremendous tool. I am with you, truly. I highly recommend that book as well.
I would also, although we are white women, the three of us are white women, we are absolutely not experts in anything but our own experience. So I would invite our community, the folks that are here with us tonight, I'm curious what your perception of whiteness is. How would you define it? And maybe how does it show up in your life? And if the answer is you're not sure, also fine. But I'm just curious if anyone has anything to add to this. I would love to hear it. I always do. All right, so
Awesome.
Coming on to, that was so great. Thank you again for the question, Kathy.
I feel like that could be the show. We're done now. We'll see.
We're done. We talked about whiteness. See you next week. Okay, so apathetic voters. Who you are matters to why you do or don't vote. And Patricia, you're welcome to advance the deck, please. Yep. And who you are matters to how you feel. So who is less likely to vote? Younger folks. 18 to 24 has the lowest percent turnout of all. Kay Kawashima Ginsburg says that in young voters, there's a significant lack of knowledge about how exactly the government works, and therefore how their vote actually matters. Poor folks may be facing logistical obstacles, prohibitive work and family schedule, difficulties with registration, and inaccessible polling place. People of color have a long and extremely justified history of mistrust of a government that has often actively and explicitly done them harm. Something that we can do to help, especially folks who fall in categories like the first two, younger folks and lower resource folks, is pretty simple. Just ask if they have a voting plan. And if they don't, see what you can do to help them put one together. your young cousins, your nieces, your nephews, your nibblings who are unsure how to navigate the voting process.
Can I pause you for a second? Can you
Please.
explain what nibblings are? I love this term.
Gender neutral niece or nephew.
I love the term, and I was so confused for so long and thinking I was misunderstanding it. Thank you. Please continue.
Yes, of course. Thank you for asking for the clarification. I also refer to my brother's dog as my nibbling. So, apply as needed. All right, so your cousins, nieces, nephews, nibblings who are unsure how to navigate the voting process, maybe a little afraid of it, daunted by it, work through it with them. A little bit of patience goes a long way. Help them figure out where their polling place is and how to get there. If voting absentee or in advance is possible and of interest to them, help them figure out how to get and return their ballot. Sometimes it's as simple as showing up at your city hall. Sometimes it's as simple as requesting it online. It differs state by state. So it's important to understand your state's requirements. You can go, no matter where you live in the United States, you can go to the Secretary of State, that website in your state, and it'll tell you exactly where, how, and when you can vote. Knowing how to vote is also really hard. And when I say how to vote, I mean what choices to make on your ballot. I feel like the presidential race is the one that has the greatest visibility, but how do you know which senator or representative you should be voting for? If you've got a field of 8 school board candidates and you're supposed to be voting for 5, how do you know? Especially if you live in a smaller community or one with a news desert, which is a whole lot of us, knowing how to prepare for an election can be really hard. In my opinion, one of the best things you can do with quote unquote apathetic voters is just help them understand the races. What is a state attorney general? Why is it an elected position? What difference does it make to people's lives? These are, in some ways, for folks that have a high level of civic engagement, these are often intuitive answers. For people who don't, they're absolutely counterintuitive. Taking the time to work through what feels confusing will have a huge payoff.
Can I ask a question on that?
Absolutely.
So I wouldn't say that I'm apathetic, but I am a human who for the last 15 years has not owned a television.
Mhm.
I certainly read the paper, but there's a lot of things that I don't know. So I have a tendency to get my voting ballot early and then talk to people that I trust and respect about the races that I don't understand. I usually do like a draft myself, but then I talk about the races I don't understand.
Mhm.
In your view, is that a cop-out?
I think that's the best possible thing to do.
Okay. Because I always have a little bit of guilt about like, should I know more? But like there's 40,000 things that you could vote for. It's like I feel
Mhm.
deeply my vote and I don't want to make a mistake. So I think sometimes in the past, I'm going to admit this, I would go in and vote and I would only mark what I knew and I would leave the rest blank.
Mhm.
And then a few years ago, I decided I don't want to do that anymore. And so I started seeking people out
Mhm.
and filling out my registration from people that I trust.
Mhm. No, I think that's super wise and a question that you can always ask of folks that you are saying, hey, I'd like to know more about this race. Can you tell me? Something that you can finish with is, who else should I be talking to? They will opinionated people always know opinionated people, and they will have folks that you should talk to about pretty much any given race. When it comes to folks who have an active mistrust of harmful systems and institutions, like our government, especially our federal government, the absolute best thing that you can do is start by validating those reservations and concerns. Coming at folks by saying, what do you mean you mistrust them? Or what I was talking earlier about whiteness being characterized by false urgency. Well, don't worry about it. Just make sure you're voting in this race. And then, we can spend the next 4 years figuring it out. That is actually not super helpful because you're encouraging someone to engage in a deeply consequential action in a way that they don't necessarily feel 100% engaged in. Listen, 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 validate. And if there are experiences that you're hearing that you don't share or you don't understand, ask more questions. What do you mean you got arrested at City Hall for protesting in the 1970s? Tell me more about that. Folks who have these mistrusts, come by them honestly. When I have these conversations in my circles, and most especially with my Black friends, I never, ever, ever reach for persuasion. I'm not there to tell anybody what to do or to vote when you are not sure that voting is even a valid response to the changes that you'd like to make in your community. What I do really consistently is share one of Alicia Garza's sentiments. Alicia is one of the co-founders of Black Lives Matter. And I think how she talks, Patricia, to your point earlier about power, is super interesting. She's got a book called The Purpose of Power that is on our Move the Needle bookshelf. We'll be talking about it more a little bit later. But one of the things that she says is that she is absolutely unwilling to abandon any arena of power, including politics, and that for people who want something different for their communities and themselves, voting is never everything, but it is one thing.
And I have feelings about, so I've gotten into a few scuffles over the years about people not voting. And I believe that you made this in one of our last episodes, this point about not voting is actually voting. And the privilege that comes with me as a white person saying, I'm not political, I'm not going to vote, means I will never be harmed, or I have a low chance of being harmed by whatever happens. Like I can say I don't care. That's a deep place of privilege, I believe. When I think about the white community, there's lots of other reasons for not voting, apathy, I think too. But yeah, you're voting essentially, you know, for who do you want to, this is what I was trying to pull from your previous episode. Who do you want to fight with? You're not voting for a perfect person or a perfect system. Who do you want to fight with? You know, even if I don't agree with the candidate of my choice on certain issues, I'd rather fight with them than their opposition. I have a better chance of moving the needle in that particular case.
I would like to say one more thing, and then I hear we've got a couple of questions, and I'd like to hear those. So, Patricia, to your point, one of the things that I wanted to make sure that I highlighted is that even, and sometimes especially if you don't vote, what non-voters care about matters, and frequently does not look like the aspirations of voters. Folks who don't care, who aren't sure about voting, who aren't convinced that that is a meaningful tool in their toolbox, still care about things. They care about the health and well-being of their families and their communities and themselves. According to one NPR article, non-voters are more likely to support a redistribution of wealth, housing bailouts, expanded social safety net programs. Younger voters care more about student loan debt forgiveness than they do about Social Security and Medicare. But because our electeds and prospective electeds know that remember that 18 to 24 block is the lowest percentage turnout in our country, because electeds and prospective electeds know who's likely to turn out, namely older folks, they tend to focus on policies and programs that benefit older people. But please remember, people who feel confused by, alienated by, disengaged by, or mistrustful of the political process will trust someone they already know. You don't have to try to convince anyone, just tell them about your process. What Patricia said a moment ago about how she came to being a slightly more informed voter, that's really meaningful. And it represents that we are all learners in all spaces. Truly, did you have a couple of things that you wanted to bring in?
Hi. Yeah, I do. So I love this conversation and this particular aspect of it. We do have a few comments, both in the Q&A and that have also cropped up in the chat. And there's really like a larger thematic thread here of reconciling the difference in values that you might have with people who are maybe feeling apathetic about their vote, or who maybe think, you know what, I want to vote with third party. My values aren't a part of this. Specifically, things that have been come up are just like a deep investment in hierarchical thinking, like bridging that values gap seems to come up at election time or in election season. And I love the two of you affirming and reaffirming, or what I hear is affirming and reaffirming that, yes, you vote, but that is one way you make change in this world. You continue the work. The work does not stop and start on November 5th. And so I'm appreciative of that. And I just wanted to lift it up, acknowledging that in the chat and in the questions, we have comments about that. We have comments about, women who the perception and possibly true of women that feel that they cannot vote their true vote, or whose husbands are taking their absentee ballots and voting on their behalf. Who knows? That's speculative, but there is a definite feeling, I think, that, our fellow sisters, okay, are they voting their true hearts, or do they have liberty to do so? And I think that's part of this larger thematic thread. Like, yes, change is needed on an ongoing basis. So that's just what I'll offer to you all as a gratitude for bringing it up, because
you.
it's coming up in people's lives too.
I just want to say one thing about that, and I'll be curious to know whether in the chat or in the panelists, personal safety trumps anything. Like if you're feeling unsafe about voting your heart because you're with a partner that is exerting too much power in your situation, like, you do what makes you safe first. There's one thing about being brave and then another thing about putting yourself in danger. So I just want to say that, as I hear, like, my husband or my partner won't let me vote the way I want to vote. Safety first. And then let's, the rest of us, if we feel like that is going on, or the potential for that going on, like, that's systematic change, right? So yep. That's the one thing I was like, ooh, hurts me to kind of hear that.
It's all good. And we'll talk about that a little bit more in future conversations as well, how to cast votes that the folks around you may argue with in safe ways. Okay. I super appreciate this. You guys are really interesting in the chat. Kathleen, I saw your question a moment ago about why should I vote? My voice doesn't count. If it's okay, I'm going to come back to that in a couple of minutes. I'm going to talk a little bit about protest voters, and then we're going to come to kind of a broader section, more Q&A, more conversational. So I'm going to come back to that, and I appreciate you dropping that in the chat. So when it comes to third-party voters, the definition is specifically protest voters. I'm not addressing people who are earnestly voting for third-party candidates, voters convinced by their platforms and rhetoric or acting for very different reasons than voters who are sending a message, quote unquote, to one or both political parties. So in this sense, I'm addressing third-party voters who are using that vote to protest one or both major political parties. The thing that I want to say specifically to this group, and you can decide how you want to talk about this with the people around you, but that protest vote is not sending a signal to the two major parties. It absolutely is not. And I'm sorry to bust anybody's bubble on that, but third-party votes show up as a tiny statistic in a tiny column. And those voter motivations are, for better or for worse, reality is their motivations are almost entirely overlooked by people in both parties. There are two more effective things that you can do. If you're trying to protest political parties, there's two more effective things you can do. The first one is vote for the people you want to fight with. Typically, there's someone that you think, man, this person is absolutely not aligned with what I want to do. And another person who maybe is also not aligned with what you want to do, but is more open to listening to their constituents in their community. Vote for them, and then show up in their inboxes, show up in their voicemails, physically show up at their coffee hours with your concerns and your expectations. It is much more productive to hold them accountable between elections than it is to put your vote into a third column that I'm so sorry. The functional reality is that is effectively ignored by both parties. And I will tell you the not secret, the most effective way to send a signal to those parties is to organize for third parties between elections. Honestly, I'm with you guys. I am astonished that our country doesn't have an effective Green Party, an effective Labor Party. I'm really excited about the emergence of the Working Families Party, and I'll be curious to see what they do. But I cannot get that work done on the ballot. I can only get that done by talking with the Sunrise Movement folks, with the Green New Deal folks, with union leaders and members, with other Working Family Party members to help develop policy platforms, to raise awareness in my community and communities, and to help cultivate support and then vote for those candidates. I also want to note, I don't believe in alarmism, and I want us to take a fairly steady approach to this in all elections. But Trump has already said explicitly in interviews that if he wins, he wants to jail people for quote unquote illegal votes. He jokingly has said that this includes people who didn't vote for him. This is incredibly irresponsible by anyone with a platform, and I don't think that we should take it. I don't think we should take that as fact. But more than that, it's more important for this win to be decisive, to send the message to prospective January 6thers that this isn't about stop the steal. This is about a big, fat loss. In 2020, the vote swung between Trump and Biden by less than 0.25%, which resulted in the now infamous directive and subsequent lawsuits from Trump to Georgia's Secretary of State to quote unquote find enough votes to overturn the result. So we got to make it decisive even in the swing communities, and that's really important to be talking with your protest voter friends and families about. I have really come at you
Can
guys
I get a
with a lot
hallelujah
of
from the court? If you just put a little hallelujah in the chat,
take a
because
little
I just
breath.
want to lift it up for this message. I had a little, and I'm going to take a little breath before we move.
Thanks, Melissa.
The comment
Hallelujah.
that yes, I want hallelujahs from everybody for
There it is.
Jess's speech. I'm just going to take a breath because I had a physical reaction when you said the off the cuff remark about jailing voters.
Yeah.
As we've seen, those are not off the cuff remarks. Those are boils that are happening, you know, and getting ready to erupt. So I'm just taking a breath. Okay. Now I'm moving on.
No, it's good. It's good. So the book that I just referenced, The Purpose of Power, it's all good. How We Come Together When We Fall Apart, cannot recommend this enough. Both the physical read and the audio read are deeply delightful. Alicia herself does the audio read, and as somebody from San Francisco who spent a lot of time in Oakland and is now in my beloved Atlanta, there is something about the author's voice speaking about such powerful concepts with such deep conviction that I just found really moving. Also continue to encourage reading Nonviolent Communication. For folks that have been with us for a little while, you've heard that we also talk about nonviolent communication as nonviolent listening and nonviolent responses. And so I just want to continue, I think it's chapter 7 in that book that I was highlighting in a past conversation.
The comment I'll make on this and this work, you know, if you're looking for dual reasons to do what we're doing right now, the reading that we're doing, engaging in questions of power, race, privilege, every aspect of my life and work has been made more skillful by doing this work.
Yeah.
I am a better fundraiser because I read and refer to nonviolent communication, and I think and read about power and race and non-binary thinking and nonviolent listening. Like, you know, if we need any other reasons to like see this as a long-term project that is about politics, certainly, and about leadership and about community, but also about just becoming more skillful humans, I'm made better by these conversations with people like Jess and Truly of good thoughts. And here we are. We have technically 10 minutes on Instagram. I'm just going to warn you, Instagram, they ruthlessly put down the guillotine when we're done at 9:30. But we will open up the questions for as long as we can hold space for that on Zoom. And so let's bring it on, Truly.
The first one that I want to do is come back to what Kathleen said a couple of minutes ago. Why should I vote? My voice doesn't count. How would you respond? Again, I'm going to come back to the chat. I'm wondering if anybody in our community has anything to offer Kathleen. The first thing that I would do, Kathleen, is I would ask. I would ask about their voting history. I would ask about what are your frustrations? What are you not seeing that you would like to? Is it, I want more frequent bus routes? Is it I'm confused about why why housing is so expensive in my community? Is it, I'm thinking a lot about Ann Arbor at this point when I'm when I'm thinking about affordable housing, but folks often have a specific sensitivity. And if they don't, maybe encourage them towards creating a voting plan and learning more both before and after the election. But again, I would start with questions.
Thanks, Jess. I appreciate that. We have a question, and I want to say this is kind of like a wraparound question. There's a lot of sharing in the chat, which I totally love. And the sharing is of the nature of in interpersonal conversations with friends and family members, neighbors, people who have different political views than you. How helpful is it to create analogies, I guess, in Jess, you and Patricia's view? How helpful is it to, Instagram folks, Patricia dipped out for a sec, but hopefully she'll be back and you'll get to hear the response. So I'm going to stall and make this question long as she gets back on. So yes, let me rephrase. A lot of questions in the chat. People are talking about what to do when they're in interpersonal dialogue with somebody who is on the opposite side of them, politically speaking. Is it helpful, in Patricia, your view, Jess, in your view, to offer analogies? You know, we have a great analogy here that says, I would not hire a man who cannot change his mind based on evidence to fix my vehicle or be my financial advisor, and that would be Trump. Thanks, Linda Peer, to everyone, right? So we have analogies. I will also say there's things coming up in the chat of people bringing up their family members. I invite you to imagine a world for your daughters. I imagine you to imagine a future for your son. What do you want that future to look like? Would you like him to have access to healthcare? Would you like her to have access to healthcare? Would you like them to have access to education? So those are also coming up in the chat. So I want to talk about maybe some brass tacks in those interpersonal dialogues and maybe talk a little bit about what you two have found effective in your interpersonal conversations. And also, is there anything you totally steer clear from?
Okay.
Is there anything they like, that didn't work, that tanked?
Jess, I have a short answer and then I'll let you have a long answer. How's that?
Good.
My short
And I'll just
answer.
pause, Patricia. Sorry, I'm going to pause and say Instagram. We're going to recap what Patricia says because she's not on there yet, but she's talking on
And
Zoom.
I'm going to be honest. I don't think I can get on there. I think Jess has to re-invite me or something.
Okay.
I don't know what's going on.
On it.
Cool.
For an answer to this, hands down, if you can use only your own experience, that is the best. I love a good analogy. I'm a big dork from way back. I can draw all the lines, but I do believe that sometimes analogies dip into shaming and blaming and lecturing. Sometimes there's good compassionate analogies, but really the stuff that I believe that is going to sway people is if you really think about your own stories and why you do what you do and what it means to you and your community in I statements. That invites people into an experience that is extremely tender and compassionate and changing. So Jess, I'll turn it over to you. I think I'm back on Instagram. Hi, y'all. Sorry I left.
Um,
now I
for
see Jess on
Instagram
Instagram
folks-
having a problem too.
Uh-oh. Well, for our Instagram folks, just so you know, you missed one top of the sentence for Patricia when she started talking. She just said, in my experience. So you were along for the ride.
I just got booted out of Instagram again, so sorry. All right, Jess, I'm just going to let you answer.
Yep, I'm going to do this quickly and then I'm going to go on because I want to make sure that we're catching any other comments that folks want to make before we wrap up, which we've got 5 minutes to do. Two things are really helpful in these conversations. One is metaphors, and the further away you can get from politics, the better. I tend to go to pie. I will use pie and cake and a heartbeat as a metaphor for anything. I can talk about pie as land use and zoning. I can talk about pie as the Constitution. I can talk about pie as the environment. Like, I love pie as a metaphor. And the nice thing about it is, with the exception of folks that don't like pie, you don't get really caught up in the details of it. You're listening for the content of the metaphor. But honestly, the most productive thing that you can do is tell your own story. One of the reasons I vote is because I, for a while, went to Georgia State, which didn't have a recycling program, and it didn't until students created it. And that was true for the United States as well. We didn't have the Clean Air Act, the Clean Water Act. We didn't have all of these things until people demanded it. I vote in part because I'm queer, and I lived for a long time in a place where I wasn't recognized and wasn't supported. And so I vote to make sure that the people who are representing me are protecting me and supporting my even more vulnerable sisters, brothers, and nibblings with the legislation and the policies that they're practicing. Truly, do we have any other questions or comments?
We do. And one of them, because I want to get to both. One of them, I'm gonna put a link in the chat, and it is just a reminder that on Patricia Berry's YouTube channel, you can view past episodes. And for those of you on Instagram Live, search up Patricia Berry or the Salty Fundraiser.
The Salty Fundraiser.
And you're gonna. The Salty Fundraiser, and you're going to find it there. Zoom friends, it's in the chat. We have some questions about, what about Facebook? Like, what about social media? And I know you two have both covered that expansively in the last episode. And the general rule is like, don't do it. You don't have to do that to yourself. And it is largely, it's not often effective. I don't know if you two want to touch on that briefly or direct.
I'm going to let Jessica speak to it because I'm the don't do it. And I think Jessica has a qualified answer to that.
Yes, go for it.
I will say that battling on social media, there is a train of thought that says it's really good to counter misinformation and disinformation. There is that. But that is not for everybody all the time. And that does not necessarily have to be your work. It is way more effective in changing minds and behaviors by having these conversations face to face. If you've got somebody who is battling you down in the comments, see if you can meet up with them over Zoom, or set it aside. Your life is short, your time is finite, your energy is precious. Spend your wild and precious life either not arguing with strangers on the internet or being very intentional about how you do it. But I would say that this is not necessarily work that needs to be done.
Can I get a hallelujah in the chat from the people that agree?
Do we have any other comments before we move on to our close? Because Insta is going to have thoughts about us in about 2 minutes.
It already had thoughts about me.
I'm reading quickly from Jamie, and she just offers something that I think will feed in nicely to your close. Jamie is doing Knock from Democracy, and she pulls this quote from their body of work. It says, often when a voter says they don't want to vote, what they're expressing is feeling of not being heard by their representatives or their government, acknowledging this hurt and gently reminding them that the more people vote, the more we'll have politicians who actually represent the will of their constituents. And so I just wanted to celebrate Jamie for doing that volunteer work and for sharing it in the chat. I think it's a really wise thing for us all to keep in mind, and certainly echoing the spirit of the night. Beautiful.
And for next week, you can send your questions ahead of time if you get the email from us. So get on our email list. Next week, very exciting. Defining, identifying, and redirecting misogyny, racism, and I have to pronounce this correct, misogynoir.
Well done.
We were rooting for you.
All right.
Patricia's informal title for next week is Decentering Douchebaggery. Please come join us. It is going to be an awesome conversation.
So if you would like to help us defray our costs, appreciate our time, labor, and experience, because I don't know if you realize, but we don't get paid for this. Please feel free to hit me up in Venmo. We take any bit of joy you would like to offer us in the form of financial support. And you can also hit me up on Zelle at Patricia-Berry, BERRY.com.
You guys, we did it.
Woo!
We did it.
I
If
didn't
you'd like
make it to
reach
the
out
end of
us-
Instagram, but I did it.
If you'd like to reach out to us, please find us over email at movetheneedle2024@patricia-berry.com. That's move the needle, MOVETHENEEDLE 2024 @patricia-berry.com. You can find both of us, all three of us actually, on Insta. Truly has wonderfully dropped in the registration for future events, for the YouTube playlist of our past conversations. You guys, this community is amazing. I so appreciate your comments, your reflections, what you are finding in the work that you're doing, your genuine vulnerability in saying, hey, there are things that I don't know that I'd like to learn more of. Can't beat it. I love this project. I love showing up for these conversations, and I will see you next week.
Bye, y'all. Stop share. How do I stop share now? Oh, no. Mistakes were made. Hold on a minute. It's going to take me a minute to figure out how to stop this. Okay. This time I really mean
could
it.
just turn the music on and kick you off.
This really
I'm gonna
means
do
it.
that.
Just and truly, I'm going to send you a email just really quickly. Okay. Bye, everybody.